have to speak very loudly. Hi, I am Aaron Pott, and welcome to Blackbird Vineyards. I'm the winemaker here. We are in the shea of barrels at Blackbird Vineyards, and it is a wonderful spot. It is temperature controlled. We're at 55 degrees right now, so both me and the fever are freezing, and I'm wearing shorts, unfortunately. Not a great idea in this area. We're also at 75% humidity, so not only is it very cold, but it's very humid in here too. So if we start shaking a little bit, you can forgive us. That's why the camera might be a little bit wobbly. But so we're going to taste some barrels today. We decided we would look at some of the 2018 wines that are still individually barreled down. They're individual lots in barrel. And these wines are going to go to bottle soon. And we decided we would look at some of those individual lots and taste through them and see how they're doing. So I will need a tool. This wonderful thing is called a wine thief, appropriately named because that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be thieving wines out of barrel. And if you'll follow me down the aisle, we will get started. This is our first barrel. And you can see the Cooper's name here. Cooper's the guy that makes a barrel. This one is Tonnellerie Bossuet. And this is owned by a guy, Jean-Louis Bossuet, who's a very good and old friend of mine. I was the first person to buy his barrels in 1994, way back then, when I was a young winemaker at Chateau Trelon-Mondot in Saint-Emilion. And Bossuet started his career as a mérandier, which is the guy that goes out into the forest and searches for trees that will become mérin, or a proto-stave that goes into making these barrels. These are the staves here. And he was trained by a guy named Pierre d'Arnajou. Pierre d'Arnajou was the house cooper at Petrus in Pomerol, a very famous domain in Pomerol, and he trained Bossuet to make barrels, and Bossuet worked as the house cooper at Petrus for 6 years before he went off on his own and started making his own barrels. And appropriately, to the right bank of Bordeaux, we are going to be tasting a Merlot out of this barrel. And this is a Merlot coming from Stagecoach Vineyards. And it's actually a lot that comprises two different vineyards. One is called 14A, romantically called 14A, and the other one is romantically called D4. You have to think Stagecoach Vineyard is a vineyard of about 700 planted acres. So a very big vineyard. They don't have room for romantic names. And it is in the hills above Oakville. So in the Pritchard Hill, Atlas Peak area of Napa Valley, sort of in the mid to the southern part of the Napa Valley, high up in the hills. The first vineyard, D4, is hovering essentially right over Oakville. It's just right above the Oakville Crossroad, if you know where that is. And it's a vineyard mainly made up of rock, red basaltic rock that is very dense, and generally makes wines that are very intense. And it has very good, for Merlot, it has very good humidity as well, and that's an important thing for us when we're looking for great sites for Merlot. We're looking for sites that have really good humidity. So again, high up. This wine is, it's just starting to reduce in barrel, which means that reduction is the opposite of oxidation. So you're you're seeing the wine kind of close up. It has a little bit of a matchstick nose to it. Smells like black olives. There's a lot of black cherry in there as well. Pretty nose, but it's telling me that it wants to get out of this barrel and go somewhere else, preferably bottle. But very, very rich nose. A lot of floral components in there as well. A lot of violet, a little bit of coffee, kind of a toasted walnut character as well. Pretty. Let's walk out this way and then we can taste it. You have to walk backwards, right? You're like the Ginger Rogers to my Fred Astaire. So the fruit really explodes on the mouth. Great density, beautiful cherry, coffee, great richness on the attack. I mean, just as you put it into your mouth, there's this big, dense, rich fruit flavor that hits you right away. And then the wine is very soft in the finish. There's no tannic edge. Very typical of Merlot. Beautiful velvety finish. And typical of what I see as colder climate Merlot. This is coming from high altitude, so we're on the mountains. It's a little cooler up there. Merlot likes it cooler. And then, like I said, Merlot loves more humidity. The more humidity in the vineyard to a point, the better Merlot grows. It has these massive leaves, and when you walk down the rows of Merlot, you can feel the humidity in the vineyard. I have a vineyard myself that has a section that's planted to Merlot, and it's in the tree line of a redwood grove. So there are redwoods all around the outside of the lower section of the vineyard, and you can really feel the moisture as you go down the vineyard rows, and makes wonderful Merlot. And Merlot, it's hard to find these sites in Napa Valley, especially for Merlot, because it's a dry climate that we have. We don't get rain essentially from April to October, except for for a very dry climate. But this is fabulous. It's really opening up now. You had that early reduction. The wine hasn't seen a lot of air. It hasn't been racked in a year. So there was a lot of reduction early on, but it's really opening up, and you really are getting the tobacco now coming into that cherry. Beautiful. Nice balance too. Good acidity. It's 18 is a good vintage for that because you have the fantastic acidity in the wines. The wines have very reasonable pHs and nice bright acidity. So the wines are very fresh. They don't feel heavy on the palate. They really kind of glide along happily. Let's continue our tasting. Another barrel. Over to here. This is Cabernet Franc. If you joined us for others of these tastings, we tasted a few wines that had Cabernet Franc from Crocker Star Vineyard. And as I said, Crocker Star was the vineyard that's a joint venture between a guy, Charlie Crocker, and the winemaker Pam Starr. And it's a very old vineyard. that was originally planted to vines in the 1870s. It's classic benchland soil. So as we talked about, where these creeks come out of the sides, the western and eastern hills of Napa, and they fan out across the valley floor, and they create like a little bench where all the rock gets deposited in a fan shape. And these soils are very desired on the valley floor because of their drainage, because of their lack of nutrients. They make things very difficult for grapes, but are wonderful for us. So I'm going to get a little bit of this Cabernet Franc, and this is coming out of a barrel called Tonnellerie Baron, another good producer from Bordeaux area. A lot of work to get that out of there. So there's some luscious Cabernet Franc coming out of there. We have two parcels in this vineyard that we buy fruit from. One of the parcels is an old vine vineyard, 40 plus years, that's rooted, and we don't use any irrigation on it. A great old vineyard. But this is the newer planting, so it's about 10 years old. And this is kind of classic, kicking out a lot of sort of classic Cabernet Franc aromas for a Cabernet Franc in barrel. It's has like dried tobacco character to it. There's a little like bell pepper. Beautiful violet note there too. A little bit of iris. Some lovely blueberry fruit. And a little bit of cedar, sort of cedar chips as well. You kind of feel like you're in a sauna. Let's make it romantic. You kind of feel like you're in a Swedish sauna.
And where is that Cab Franc from again?
The Cabernet Franc's from Crocker's Star, and that's in St. Helena. So this is a upper valley. This is about as far up the valley as Blackbird gets, because most of our vineyards are down in southern Napa Valley, or in the hills, and this is in St. Helena, which is northern mid-valley. And as you get further north in Napa Valley, you get into warmer temperatures. The fog really regulates the temperature in the south part of the valley. It really influences the vineyards in the south part. So as you go south, you get closer to the bay, you get closer to that fog that makes it cooler. So let's go out this way and give this a try. And this is really classic Cabernet Franc.
And we're only tasting 2018 wines out of barrel, correct?
2018 wines, yeah. And these wines are wines that are going to eventually end up in the principal wines, in the illustration, in Paramore, and in Contrarian. So this one will likely be a component of maybe the three of them, but most likely in Paramore, which is the Cabernet Franc dominant wine. That's very rich. I mean, incredible density there and great weight. It's not tannic at all, though. I mean, incredibly smooth tannins, which is surprising because you have this massive attack where there's blueberry and that cedar and the tobacco and all of these incredible Cab Franc flavors, and then you think this wine's going to be really grindingly tannic and wide grain, but the grain is so smooth and so soft. It's really wonderful. It doesn't at all correspond with the aromatics of the wine that seem so rustic.
And we have another question. How do you determine the blend for the wines? How does Cabernet Franc affect the blend?
That's a good question. How does Cabernet Franc affect the blend, and how do I determine the blends? So throughout the year, we're constantly tasting the wines. And that really starts as soon as the wines come into the winery as grapes. We continually taste the wines. We're tasting every day during the harvest. That tapers down to tasting weekly the wines, to tasting bi-weekly the wines. And we have some idea of where the wines are going to go from that. And then we will sit around, a group of us, myself, Kyle Mizuno, will sit around the table and taste the wines, go through, see what goes together. And oftentimes, as I've often said, it's not the best wines that go together perfectly, but it's the wines, sometimes the wines that have characteristics that sort of stick out in a weird way, that attach to another characteristic that sticks out in a weird way in another wine and comes together and makes a wonderful blend. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle where you have a lot of these knobbly pieces, and somehow those knobbly pieces fit together and create something that's a whole. This wine is very soft and very beautiful. It's kind of classic Cabernet Franc, and one of the things that we see in Cabernet Franc is that it has a fantastically rich mid palate. And when we're blending Cabernet Sauvignon is a wine that often has a little bit of a hole in the middle. The mid palate isn't as dense as you would like, or can be grainy. And Cabernet Franc, in just a little touch of it, I mean, even as little as 1%, can sort of fill in the whole of that Cabernet Sauvignon. We often call Cabernet Sauvignon a donut wine because it has that hole in the middle. Cabernet Franc is the donut hole. It fills it in. Okay, moving on. We need to try some more Cabernet Franc because that's one of the things we're all about. This is one of my favorite Cabernet Francs. This is also in a 10-other barrel. Super barrel. These guys originally came to us because they had a way of putting a little door on the barrels. And that little door allowed us to fill the barrels with grapes and actually ferment inside the barrel. And so we did a lot of barrel fermentations that way. And then we realized it was just as easy for us to pop off the head of the barrel and put it back on and fill it up with grapes. But we love the wood that they were doing, that we decided to stick with those wonderful barrels. So this is, again, Cabernet Franc. And this is back to Stagecoach Vineyard and another block that's very unromantically called I-16. And it's at the very top of Stagecoach Vineyard. So we're about 1,600 feet in altitude, way up on the top of Atlas Peak. From the top of the vineyard, you can see San Francisco, the Bay Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, probably half of California. It's so high up, and one of the higher vineyards in the area. And this has been a vineyard that we've been producing for the last 5 years at Blackbird, and we have it exclusively. It's been a fabulous vineyard for us. We've really enjoyed it. I don't know if it comes across, but you can see the color of this is extraordinary. I mean, Cabernet Franc can often be a little bit bricky at this stage in a 2018. But after a couple of years or after a year and a half of age in in barrels. They can often go a little bit browny, but this is just black. I mean, a very dark color. Again, it's showing a little bit of that reduction character, a little bit of the matchstick. Really fantastic. It's almost like blueberry pie. This fabulous blueberry, like fresh baked blueberry pie. It always reminds me of my grandmother, who made blueberry muffins in the morning when I stayed at her house on the coast of Maine. And you just have this fabulous aroma that fills the room, and you have the patisserie of the pie itself and the blueberries. Wonderful. This is real classic Cabernet Franc. You get the tobacco, you get the cedar, you can just smell the cigar box. Great freshness here. Smells like candy. It's so rich, this wine. I mean, it tastes like some sort of blueberry confection because it's very rich. I mean, this is a dry wine. There's no residual sugar. Well, a tiny bit of residual sugar left in the wine, less than 2 grams per liter. So tiny amount of residual sugar left in the wine, but no sweetness whatsoever. But it tastes so sweet. I mean, it just has this sweetness that comes from these wonderful tannins coming together perfectly. Great density here.
When will you start blending these wines?
We have started blending these wines. We've already done trial blends on them, and we've been doing that for about a year now, just looking at how they come together and what we need to produce and what we want to produce and where these wines are going to go. And we will eventually, very close to bottling, we'll put the wines together in tank, and that will be the sort of final blending. A lot of people believe that you need to marry the wines, that the wines need to go together earlier rather than later, and that's just not true. They come together brilliantly. When they come together late, you get to taste exactly what the wines are going to how they're going to come together when they go to tank. That doesn't change how they age. So we'll get very close to bottling, put them into tank together, and put them to bottle without any filtration. So just a clean racking. They'll go through a little screen that will catch anything that's any large debris, but no filtration whatsoever. It's wonderful. The finish is beautiful. It's just these blueberries dancing with cigars. It's like we could make a cartoon out of this. It's so.
Yeah, you don't want to dump this wine.
I don't want to dump this. I just have to have one more taste. I'm sorry, you'll have to wait for me, people at home. That's delicious. I can't spit that. It's too good. Okay, let us return to our stack of barrels. I think I've got one more. Cab Franc for you. All the way down at the end. Oh, this is a fun one. Yeah, let's go here. This is another Cabernet Franc. This is from a vineyard, Hudson Vineyards in Carneros. So we're in the very southern Appalachia in Napa Valley. Carneros shares half of its appellation with Sonoma. So we have, this is Carneros Napa Valley side, And it's a vineyard called Hudson Vineyard that's owned by a very lovable guy, Lee Hudson. Lee's family owned Humble Oil in Texas, and Lee was not interested in black gold, but was interested in black Pinot Noir, and decided to go over to Burgundy to learn all about Pinot Noir. He was brought into the welcoming arms of a guy named Jacques Cess, who owns a beautiful domain called Domaine du Jacques. If you don't know those wines, get to know those wines. They're lovely wines. And Jacques taught Lee just about everything he could about growing Pinot Noir. And then Lee came back from that experience so in love with Pinot, he wanted to find a place where he could grow Pinot Noir in California, and bought 2,000 acres in Carneros, and slowly realized that Pinot Noir was not the thing to plant in Carneros. And we got together with Lee and created a planting of Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's really, that's kind of a backbone of Blackbird Vineyards. It's one of these very cool climate vineyards. It's gravelly soils, what we call hair, clay, loam, gravelly, loamy soils, just above a creek that's surrounded by oak trees. A lot of predatory birds there. We've got a lot of hawks in the area, and it's a kind of classic California creek, just above a classic California creek, and these mountains rise up. There's chanterelle mushrooms in the mountains, just fabulous spot, and very good spot to be a grape. So good if you wanted to live your life as a grapevine, you might want to live your life at Lee Hudson's place. So let's get a little of this. This is in a barrel. It's made by Tannery Sylvain. And the Sylvain family has their cooperage in Pomerol. So it's one of the few cooperages that's actually in the right bank of Bordeaux, where Merlot and Cabernet Franc are so prevalent, more so Merlot than anything else. Jean-Luc Sylvain is the second generation cooper to run the cooperage. It's a family operation. His son and daughter are slowly taking over. Jean-Luc was a school chum of my secretary in France, and I had this amazing secretary who was actually played on the French national soccer team, and was an amazing woman, Christine Brachet. Give her a shout out because she's so awesome. And he would come along and chat with her quite a lot, so I got to learn a lot from Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc has a property of his own in the satellite regions of Saint-Emilion, and makes some lovely wines there. Makes some fabulous barrels, and really good chap. So one of our guys. So back to the Hudson Franc. This one's it's a bit shy today. It doesn't want to pop out of the glass. Again, with that Cab Franc, the first thing you get is blueberry. A little bit of cherry in there. This one kind of has a little mintiness to it. It's almost menthol, but very, very subtle. And the little straw, there's wet rock. There's a citrus note that I'm getting as well, be like a kumquat almost. And then coconut. Interesting nose. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and it's kind of all disparate, wanting to come together. Beautiful, like a porcini aroma as well, porcini mushroom. This one's it's a little leaner than the other two, and you kind of expect that in a vintage like 18 that was quite a cool vintage for us, not a lot of hot days. All of these wines were harvested between October 6th and this one was the latest, October 31st we harvested this wine, so a Halloween wine. And very late in the season, Lee Hudson always throws a wonderful party for all of his clients that buy fruit from his vineyard, and he always has to wait for us because we're always the last person to pick in there because we have all of the Bordeaux varieties in there. So they're the latest ripening varieties on the ranch, and we're always the last in there to pick. It's a wonderfully balanced wine here, very complex, a lot of different things going on. Not the biggest wine, nowhere near the density of the I-16 that we had before, or the Crocker Star that came before, but it's a beautiful complexity here. You can see again, incredible color density, bright, very bright acid.
Are the alcohol levels the same for all three that we've tasted? The alcohol levels
are not the same for all three. The question is, are the alcohol levels the same? No, they're varying. And this is probably the lowest of the alcohol levels, but they're right at 14.5%, most of these guys, but this is probably the lowest, maybe 14.3. You can see right where that would fit into to a blend, because you have the bright acidity, you have the lower pH there. You can see it really brightening up a blend, giving it some life. It's always nice to have a little bit of acid in the winemaker's palate to add to wines, to brighten them up, to freshen them up. And this is very, very fresh, very nice fruit. It's like you're in a painting of fruits and flowers. It has there's so much floral going on and so much fruit going on. It's not at all green though. It's Cabernet Franc can be very green, and this is not at all green. Wonderful. Almost a flavor of brown sugar in the finish. Fabulous. Okay, let's do one more.
Okay, one more.
So we have to go for the King Cabernet Sauvignon. I'm gonna go M5. So again, we're back to Stagecoach Vineyard. This is probably one of the legendary vineyards of Stagecoach. M5, the owners of Stagecoach make a wine from off of this vineyard. I make a wine from off of this vineyard called Her Majesty's Secret Service. Blackbird gets a bit of M5, and we make a wine that is mainly the mainly the backbone of the Contrarian, which is our Cabernet Sauvignon dominant wine. This is again in a Sylvain barrel, and I want to point out this is a Sylvain signature barrel, and that's sort of the highest level of barrels that he does. This is a transport style barrel with the steel hoops.
And this is M as in Mary 5, correct?
M as in Mary, yes. This is M as in like Mary, Mother of Jesus. I mean, it's that good. I mean, you can smell it from here. It's just like, it's so powerful. It's jumping out of the glass. Wow. the first thing you get is this massive nose of toffee and blackberry and boysenberry. A little bit of cherry. It's really that toffee that's dominant. And then forest floor. It really it smells like a forest of pine. You know, you get the pine character and the mushroom. That's lovely. Coffee, real strong coffee character. An espresso, but an espresso and you're just about to hop on the back of a Vespa with Sophia Loren driving. Oh, fever! If it wasn't the era of COVID, you could try this. And it's so good. Fantastic nose. Hugely rich. I mean, it's like biting into a chocolate cake. It's so rich. You know those chocolate desserts that you get where you can only eat half of it because it's way too rich. It's kind of the same thing as just this incredible density and richness. You can almost cut it with a knife. It's so dense and lovely. It's beautiful in the finish too because it goes from this toffee to this tobacco, this black currant, and then it sort of fades in this beautiful rose flavor, like rose water. It's pretty. And the length is incredible. I mean, the finish is still going on and on. Beautiful density too. I mean, you can't see that color. It doesn't do it any justice, but it's just dark as anything. Dark black, and you can see it just stains the glass when you turn it. Gorgeous. That's a beautiful wine. So that's a little bit of what we do here in the barrel cellar at Blackbird Vineyards. A little tour of this small and wonderful place, and a real tour of the principal wines: Illustration, Paramore, and Contrarian through those vineyards. So thank you for joining us. I hope to see you soon. If there are any questions?
I think the only last question we had was, what is your favorite lot of 2018 currently? Is it that Stagecoach Cab Franc?
You know, we did a wonderful, there are so many great ones. And 2018 and 2019, there are mythical vintages that don't come around that often. And they're wonderful vintages. And my favorite wine, I mean, I think that I-16 Cabernet Franc is wonderful. This M5 Cabernet Sauvignon is wonderful. There's we do a little bit of Syrah from Hudson Vineyard. That's kind of a little secret of ours that has rarely seen the light of day. And in 2018, it was fabulous. So there's a lot of good wines. I can't commit to one. I can commit to one woman, but I can't commit to one wine. I'm sorry.
And with that, we'll close. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Take care. Stay safe.